Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to today's Kyle Seraphin Show. It is Thursday morning here on September the 4th, and I'm a couple of minutes behind because I wanted to find this one little clip that I remember, and I'd played it previously, and so I had to go digging into my little archives of downloaded stuff, and I found it, so we're good to go. We're going to be talking today about this new crisis of CDC credibility that I keep hearing about, and there's multiple stories about it in multiple different outlets, and so the question is this new? I mean, is it really? You guys just realized that people don't trust the CDC? It's great. So, ongoing concerns, whether it's RFJ Jr.'s fault, who's to blame, I'm going to give you my take on it. But I wanted to grab this clip specifically because it talks about the portrayal of a Nazi by Christoph Waltz, who's an Austrian actor that did Inglourious Basterds, put him on the map. He was absolutely brilliant in the movie. He was fantastically evil. And the question was, how did you do it so well? And what it should remind us as we look out into the space of the world and people are doing things that don't make sense to us and they're being mean or they're being illogical or they're accusing us of things that are atrocious and are clearly so far off the map. The thing to remember is that nobody thinks they're the bad guy in their own story. And that is the way that Waltz was able to portray a Nazi in a way that was utterly chilling because he thought he was the good guy, like everybody does. You have to think you're the good guy to be able to move on in that space. You cannot believe that you're the bad guy and carry on in some sort of, character arc where you're the evil character. Nobody does, because you would just eliminate yourself. And so that's what's worth talking about. I also wanted to give you guys kind of a heads up. We don't always do this right up front, but I wanted to tell you that we've got some interesting news, or whatever you want to call it. I've discovered, I would say, that our Rumble channel is not just being censored a little bit, it's being censored a lot. And so I went to the leaderboard. That's our single biggest platform is on Rumble. And I'll show you guys the evidence of this a second ago. I didn't actually put it into a presentation area, but the number 44 most appreciated, highest ranked views, et cetera, on Rumble yesterday had 128,000 views and about 500 likes. The number 45, one after that, was 25,000 with 500 likes. And I was just below that as 46, which you guys keep telling me that I'm on the leaderboard. I never look, but it's absolutely staggering. We're number 46. We have 10,000 views and also about 500 likes. And then below that, they have 40,000 plus views and 450 likes. We're clearly getting censored on the platforms that we're on. So if you guys want to help us out, the best way you can do it is actually go and subscribe over on YouTube right now. It's a really strange moment where we are looking at the censorship mechanisms are coming at us from our own side. I'm fairly confident of that. They also have an absolute garbage back-end platform. You guys don't see this, but I have to upload the thumbnail multiple times just to get it to go through. My buddy Steve Friend said he had the same problem. So follow us over on X at Kyle Seraphin. Make sure you're following us over on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin, and I would greatly appreciate if you guys kind of bumped us up over there. You can always follow us on Locals, and dozens of you guys have added your names to that account over there, so I'm very appreciative, and I'm very grateful that you've decided to support us over on Locals. It's awesome, and we're going to have a call-in show tonight, so you guys can call in and talk to me and tell me what it is you're thinking about. Kind of a rambling open to our show, which is not the way we always do it, so let's get into a real quick ad read for our friends over at Undertac, and I'll tell you, I'm kind of a weird dude. Maybe all men are like this, but I am certainly this way. Whenever I have like a favorite pair of underwear, favorite shorts, whenever I have a favorite fill in the blank thing that I like, I actually hold on to it and I only wear it when I'm like most needing to, feel strong or perform. That's the story with the Undertac. I've got to get enough for every single day of the week, but right now it actually is my reserved pair that when I'm like, I need this, I need the boost, that's where I go. Undertac.com. The promo code is Kyle20 for 20% off. The summer's here. Heat and humidity, discomfort, that's 100% the case here in Texas. It's actually disgusting outside all the time. I just hide indoors. But that's why we switched over here to Undertac. Like I said, I hold on to them for the moment when I know I'm going to need them. They're running the leading edge of premium comfort and function. Forget the old boxer briefs if that's something you're used. Undertac was built for special forces operators in brutal conditions, and their premium modal fabric wicks away moisture 50% better than cotton. It's a naturally antibacterial substance, keeps you cool, dry, chafe-free. That's a big deal if you're crushing a workout or if you're just out there mowing the lawn and you're trying to not die in the heat of Texas. I did like an hour on my exercise bike out on the patio yesterday and just got completely crushed. Saw my heart rate like at 170 for the entire exercise. And this is the kind of times when you want something like Undertac. They've also got a cool little hidden E&E pouch. It's built for cash or micro SD cards or an Allman if you're Steve Friend. Keeps you ready, whatever your mission is. And you can always kind of stash something back there. It's under the tag for those of you who have bought it and can't find it. Yeah, it's actually made for you not to be able to find. That's why it's hidden. Anyhow, they've got more than boxer briefs. They've got stuff for women. They've got socks that I've been wearing as well. Their battle weave socks are 5 times stronger than merino wool. And yet they also have a super high degree of comfort. I put those on them with my new running shoes and I absolutely love them. So check out all their stuff. They have a great looking product. They have a great branded product. And, their skull doesn't look bad either if you're kind of a macho type dude. I wear their shirts in the gym as well. So check them out. Again, undertac.com is the website. Link in the show description. Undertac.com. Use promo Kyle. You get 20% off site-wide. So it doesn't matter what you're into. If you see the girls' boxer briefs, the men's boxer briefs, if you want to buy them as a couple, check them out. Put your booty in them. Go ahead and check them and you will be pleased. I have not changed underwear in 16 years, as in I don't change the style. And these are the first people that have made me consider something other than what I was wearing every single day. So I appreciate them being our sponsor and I appreciate all of you. And let's get diving into a discussion about where the rights come from and, sort of the just generally ignorance that we are facing in this country. All right, I spent time finding this clip, and I want you guys to see it right up front. Again, this is a man discussing a movie. If you have not seen the movie Inglourious Basterds, you're going to miss the reference, but you will not miss the understanding of what he's talking about. It's critical for us to understand that the people that are doing the things they're doing, however illogical they may be, are the heroes in their own story. One of my buddies refers to it as first-person character syndrome or something to that effect. We all do that. We all look around and we interpret the world in the way that we see it, where we are the central character. And I think the most interesting people are people who can realize that they are not the central character, but they are a character in the movie and they care about what they care about, but they can also understand what other people care about. And that can be either sympathy or empathy, both of which are really, really important to be a good interviewer, to be a good parent, to be a good partner, to be a good citizen, to be a good neighbor. All these things are really, really necessary. You have to be able to either understand how other people think or actually understand as they think. And oftentimes we do not. So our best actors do bring a real skill, even though we like to dog on actors as a general rule, because it's like you're pretending to be somebody. They often can teach us things through art. I had an English teacher when I was in high school, and she said, history tells us what happened. And I think that it's critical to understand what happened. But she said art tells us, or literature more specifically in her case, literature tells us what happens. And so that reflection in art is critical. This is a great understanding. Again, here's the clip. Took me a little bit, but I think it was worth waiting.
Do you remember the movie Inglourious Basterds?
I never watched it.
Oh, it's one of the greatest films ever made. I mean, I cannot recommend it enough. Christoph Waltz, who plays the Nazi, he plays the main Nazi, it put him on the map. He was this obscure Austrian actor, and then this movie made him an international star, and I think he won an Oscar for it, actually. He's chillingly brilliant, how good he is in this Nazi role, right? And he's relaxed, and he's got a sense of humor. He doesn't play this caricature of evil, you know? That's one of the reasons he's so chilling. So he was on a talk show when he was promoting the movie, and the host asks him, what did you have to do as an actor to play evil so effectively? And he's got this look of total confusion on his face. He doesn't understand the question. He goes, what? And the host says again, you were so good. What did you have to source yourself from to play evil? You were so scary. And he looks at the host and goes, he wasn't evil. And this is why he was so good at his role, because what he understood is no one thinks they're evil. Everyone thinks they're on the side of good. Everyone thinks they're on the side of good. When we look at our political discourse these days, it's freaking hilarious. Everybody's accusing each other of being evil and bad, but both sides, if you talk to them, actually think that they're trying to do good. Both sides are on the side of good. And if you just remember that people think they're on the side of good. Now, they may be misdirected, and all of those things are still true, but everybody thinks they're on the side of good. If you just start with that basic knowledge, how we interact is very different, where we no longer seek to criticize because you're evil. That's my judgment. But I seek to understand where you're sourcing that good from. And curiosity is a great way to interact with human beings with whom we disagree.
This is the sort of Socratic method, if you will. Somebody says something to you that is utterly preposterous and sounds like it comes from a place of malice. And then the question is, tell me more. Like, why do you think that way? I woke up this morning with, I've been waking up with hate mail for the last couple of days. Hate mail saying that completely random people who've never met me, don't know me, probably don't listen to the show. I don't think that they would find us completely unreasonable over here. And they say things like, I hope that you're bankrupted. I hope that your family is thrown out on the street. I hope that the federal agents kick down your door and shoot your dog. We don't have a dog anymore. She died while we were doing this, and we decided not to have another one. That's a pretty awful thing to think. And none of those people think they're awful, although they sat there and they blindly typed in some sort of frenzied rage to a complete stranger that they've never heard of. They don't know anything about me. They know that James O'Keefe released 90 seconds of me speaking in a deposition that went on for 7 hours. They don't know that I wasn't a party to the lawsuit. Do you know that? For those of you who saw this James O'Keefe piece, unlimited hate will come in from some of the dumbest people, I imagine. But none of them think that they're bad. None of them think that they're evil. None of them think that they are wrong. They all think that they're actually defending something good, which is the same story of Christoph Waltz or Christopher Waltz. He played a character because he understood that about people. And so I'm looking at this story about Epstein file released, and everybody thinks they're the good guy. The people that are defending Donald Trump, they're the good guys. They're defending our person, our president. He's going to come in and solve the problem. There are the people that are defending the victims. How could you defend anybody that was a sex trafficker? There are people that are defending the government. There are people that are defending the process. Everybody thinks that they're the good guy. It's very interesting. And I'm going to present some different sides to that story because I think it's worth hearing. I don't know the answer to what happened with Jeffrey Epstein. And let's be totally honest, neither do you. Because we don't have access to all the information. And they've given us 33,000 pages on a Google file that are all redacted. 97% of it, someone said, was already released. I know a huge chunk of it was already public knowledge. So how much of this stuff was created, and then the victim-villain arc has been crafted, and we are just being, we're just being fed whatever it is that we're most interested in, and then we jump on and we follow it, and we think that that must be true. The truth is rarely what one person thinks. If you guys have ever interviewed an eyewitness, you will find out that eyewitnesses are terrible at telling you what happened because it's colored by all their experience and the way that they felt about things and their limited vantage point and the things they could and the things that they couldn't hear. We're going to cover a story about a British writer who was arrested for his tweets. He tweeted something and was arrested by British police. That's where we're at in this world right now, in Western democratic type societies. And I assure you, those cops do not think that they're the villain. They might have a little bit of nagging doubt, the way that a lot of people probably did when they were enforcing COVID restrictions, but I don't think they think they're the bad guy. I'm going to show you some of the lunatics that I think are on the left. Loony, like absolutely batshit crazy, not in touch with reality. Joy Reid types. Sarah/Timothy McBride. People who have gone out there and made statements that you just look at them and you just go like, what a fool. How would you say that out loud and think that anyone would take you seriously? And yet people take them seriously. And I bet you they take themselves seriously. We're going to get into the first piece is the Epstein story because it's ongoing. It continues to be something that is going to just nag. Look, this was the biggest misstep, hands down, PR nightmare disaster, ongoing failure that the Trump administration has had to deal with. And they can't put it to bed because the degree of transparency and Donald Trump saying it's a hoax, none of this stuff is going to win. There are too many people that are interested in the story. There are too many people that are upset about the story. There are too many people that think they understand things that may or may not be true. And so this sort of like lack of understanding leaves us in this really stupid place because we had a joint press conference where Thomas Massie, who I by default like, I think Tom Massie is smarter than your average member of Congress, but I'm not a blind cheerleader. I'm sure he has his faults. And then Ro Khanna, congressman out of California, you have this bipartisan press conference where they want to force a vote, but the White House and the GOP are trying to quash it. And so you have this big story about how are we going to get Epstein information out to the public? And then they hold this tearful press conference with victims talking about things and so on. I noticed that there was one of those commentators who was on the political right who said that the accessories and the outfits that these women were wearing, even their sunglasses, were probably more than this person takes home in a month. So these women now have means because a lot of them are part of the settlement that went on with JP Morgan and other things. So they've been paid off. And this is kind of like a minor industry. So we have to consider whether or not that's something that's going on too. Here's the story from NBC News. A group of Jeffrey Epstein accusers, mind you, he's dead and no longer can face accusations, on Wednesday told an emotional, gut-wrenching story of sexual abuse at the hands of the late convicted sex offender and his co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, raising pressure on lawmakers to back the release of all the files that the Justice Department has in the years-long Epstein investigation or investigations. One of the accusers, Marina Lacerda, identified herself as minor victim number 1 from the 2019 federal indictment in New York. I was one of dozens of girls that I know personally were forced into Jeffrey's mansion at 9 East 71st Street in New York City when we were just kids. This is the first time that I ever publicly speak about what happened to me. I was only 14 years old when I met him. Goes on. It was the summer of high school. I was working 3 jobs trying to support my mom and my sister when a friend of mine in the neighborhood told me I could make $300 to give a guy a massage. She said, I went from a dream job to my worst nightmare. Yeah, interesting. And one of the saddest things about all of this is that we now have people, we're exposing the stories of these women. And the stories of these women were that they were in some sort of financial desperation or they were looking for something that they weren't getting somewhere else. You know, where was the father to say absolutely no? Absolutely not. You're 14 years old. You're not going to go give massages to a grown man, some creep. You know, most of us that are in this audience, if some grown man was offering $300 for our 14-year-old daughter to go give a massage, we're going to find that man with a tomahawk. Or maybe we're going to pull some kind of suppressed pistol routine on them. That person doesn't get to walk away from that. That's insane. And yet he did it for years, right? And so that's the allegation. So how did that even happen? Well, it happened because people didn't know what was happening at the time. And there's a journalist who's been covering this. I think his name is Michael Tracy. He went on News Nation. I've got a couple of clips from News Nation of late. They're popping up more and more that I see on the feed. But this is actually an interesting side of sober coverage of this. The story of who these people were, who they are, whether or not they were willing to accept normal questions. They were talking about whether or not they could say the names of the so-called client list. And the defense was if they said them, then they would be eliminated. They would be financially ruined because they'd be sued into oblivion by rich and powerful men, which means that they don't have the proof to back up the accusations they're saying. And that's troubling. We live in a society where we shouldn't be smearing people. I don't care what side of the aisle they're on if we don't have proof. I also live in a world where I'm a parent and I require a little bit less proof to defend children. So those things can exist in my mind at the same time. This is kind of a sobering, maybe reality check on some of the things that we're hearing about because it can be salacious from both sides and I can sit in the middle. And I told you, this is my general take, and I will continue to say this. Somewhere between the two things, the spectrum, was what happened. And I don't know where it was, and I don't think we have the evidence that's going to be available to decide what it was. Either Jeffrey Epstein was a guy who got involved with post-pubescent minor young girls, so after puberty, before they hit the age of consent, and had some sort of individual relationships with them, inappropriate, obviously, and that was it. Or we had a rich and powerful blackmail-based pedophile network trading in children and influence and videos of sexual compromise, and it's got to be somewhere in the range because those are the kind of the outliers that we've been yelled at. This is what is being contested, and it's being tried in the court of public opinion without everybody having all the information. It's really wild to do it. And of course, like Donald Trump saying this is a hoax doesn't make it right. And the reason why is because you have this overlap. I think the reporter talks about this a little bit as well. But the overlap comes down to rich and powerful people another tier of justice for people that are considered quote unquote elites, and the injuring the destruction of the innocence of children. And so you can't divorce this. That's why it is a bipartisan issue that is of massive concern. Here's News Nation's sort of interview of an attorney who got not an attorney, a journalist who was kicked out of the press conference. And I think that also is sort of telling, because it led me to my discussion of like, what do we have a right to do as press, as people who can speak, as people who want to send horrible threats, or like nasty wishes to me? This concept of rights sort of entered into my brain too.
Michael, what happened?
Well, I was invited to attend this press conference, believe it or not, by Ro Khanna's staff. So I was an invited member of the press. I was duly admitted, and I waited my turn to ask a pertinent question. I posed the question to Bradley Edwards, who is a lawyer, who was one of the longtime legal antagonists of Jeffrey Epstein and represented many of Epstein's purported victims, including Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who was declared to have been deceased in April of this year. And throughout this press conference, Virginia Roberts Giuffre was being spoken of as though she were this truth-telling martyr, as though she had an unblemished record of credibility. She was the one who actually spawned, in large part, the initial theory that Epstein orchestrated a massive pedophile ring and enforced it through a blackmail operation which ensnared prominent people. Edwards is actually one of the two lawyers who filed the motion on Giuffre's behalf in 2014 that first introduced these allegations. So I wanted to ask Bradley Edwards, why is it that we should think of Virginia Roberts Giuffre as a remotely credible person, given her demonstrable track record of repeat fabrications? She accused Alan Dershowitz for nearly a decade straight of having abused her sexually as a minor. She described in graphic detail at least six instances in which she had vehemently claimed that Alan Dershowitz had committed sex crimes against her, and then she recanted those claims. Edwards was one of her lawyers when she recanted those claims. She had what was called a memoir manuscript that she wrote, hoping to get a giant book deal or even movie deal around 2011, 2012, in which she made a host of salacious allegations against prominent individuals like the former majority leader of the U.S. Senate, George Mitchell, or a Harvard professor named Stephen that she claimed that she had sex with. She then retracted the claim about the Harvard professor while she was under deposition.
So, Michael, you've chronicled this at great length at your great Substack, and I invite readers to go and make up their own minds. Actually, there was another moment at the press conference that really seemed to throw cold water on the claim of there being a list of pedophiles who Jeffrey Epstein had procured underage girls from. Let's play this SOT 1 from the attorney, and I want you to respond to this.
Every one of these women was abused by Jeffrey Epstein, and his scheme was to personally abuse women. When they reached a certain age, he did farm a section of them, some of them, out to some of his friends.
Michael, what's...
All right, so they go on to talk about whether or not that means that they aged out, and so this was some sort of like legal and consensual discussion, and maybe some of that is true. And if you guys want to go check out Michael Tracy's Substack and read about it, he's going to give you an alternative opinion to a lot of the stuff that is out there right now, and I don't think it necessarily plays on one side or the other. But it's worth knowing that there is this ongoing question of how this works. The accusers said that if Congress wasn't willing to compile or release all the names in investigative documents pertaining to Epstein, they would compile their own list of names to hold Jeffrey Epstein's orbit accountable. Quote, "Together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know who were regulars in the Epstein world," said Lisa Phillips, who said she was brought to Epstein's island. Another woman said, "We are the keys. We know the games. We know the players." He's not alive anymore to be able to contest any of this stuff, and he's not allowed to validate any of this stuff. So this is a salacious argument, but we're talking about someone who cannot be held accountable, and then people who may or may not ever be brought to light. And the question is what's the motivation? You always have to ask that question, because as someone who sat and taken, I would say, credible allegations of sexual assault from women, only to go out there and walk the facts, walk the scene, and realize that it was absolutely not credible, Although it sounded really good at a press conference, it would have sounded really good when I sat at a conference table and I received information. You're like, this is a truly evil, diabolical scheme. I'm reminded of something I heard sitting on the around the conference table at an Indian reservation. And when you listen to it, you'd be like, this is horrible. We cannot allow this to happen. And you walk out there and you're like, this entire thing was fabricated. There's literally no one to substantiate it, including some really easy to substantiate claims, like somebody was chasing me in a vehicle. And then you find out that a neighbor's got a video camera that shows where their vehicle was running, and they were driving drunk, from what it looks like, and crashed into a tree, and there was no other car on the road. They were all by themselves. And suddenly you realize, eyewitness accounts, victim accounts, they are an important thing, and we should not discount them. And yet we can't just take them at their word, particularly years and years and years later. And then you have to ask the question, why? With genuine curiosity, because I don't think those women think that they're a villain. And, I bet you Jeffrey Epstein didn't think that he was the villain either, even if he was. All those things are worth sort of considering. I'm going to get into this discussion about rights because this man was kicked out of a press conference, and it made me realize that the right to speak is something that we really hold dear, but it may not be something that we understand the why. I had a clip sent by my friend Aaron Stevenson, who is constantly doing deep thinking and expanding my mind. So I had some of that happen to me yesterday. And before we get to that, let's just talk about speaking if you don't want your speech to be shared with government agencies, with big tech, with the data brokers out there or cyber criminals. If you don't want things from your phone, your own data, whether it be your conversations, your text messages, etc., your location, if you don't want that shared, you can actually do something about it. And you can have something like I do that sits on my desk. This is the Faraday sleeve from Silent. It's slnt.com/KYLE. They make Faraday products that block all wireless signals. That is your right to contain your own data. You can actually take some control of it. Mostly, we do not have the ability to do that when it comes to our terms of service if we want to use certain things. But if you want to shut that stuff off, you want to turn off cellular and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and GPS and RFID and NFC. Do you know how many of these things are out there just pinging the world and trying to tell everyone where you are? When you shut off the signal, you shut off the tracking. Nobody can have remote access. Nobody can have any breadcrumbs to figure out where you're at. Our special operations teams use these worldwide. Intelligence officers use the same types of technology. If you need to have a tool like a cell phone for safety, but you don't necessarily want to broadcast to everybody all the time what you're up to, you can turn it all off and you can go silent with one of their Faraday products. I use this backpack that you're seeing on the screen here, the E3 Everyday Faraday Backpack. It's freaking awesome. It's really, really well designed, and I'm a backpack guy. If you ask me, peak backpack ruck technology was sort of like Vietnam era. I have an Alice ruck that I've been carrying for over 20 years at this point, and I think it's maybe one of the best. This Faraday backpack is very, very good. It's comfortable, it's well thought out, and it has really nice features that hold way more than it looks like it should in a compact form feature. So check them out. Again, E3 Faraday Backpack. It's silent, slnt.com/KYLE. We're doing two different kind of cool products today. It's fun to do. I'm a product guy. Like, I'm a gear junkie. You guys probably know that already if you follow this program. Okay, rights. Where do they come from? That right to be able to speak out, that right to be able to face your accusers, that right to be able to sit in a press conference and act as a member of the press. Where does that come from? What is rights? It turns out that's one of the fundamental problems in our nation right now, is this inability of both sides to actually look out in the world and decide. Do we have a right? What the hell is a right? And where do they come from? And I keep finding over and over again people on the political left, because they actually seem to hold government as God, as the granting feature, as the creator of rights. And those of us that are on the right, especially those of you who are Christians, if you follow a faith tradition like that, you look over on the other side and you go, no, I don't think so. I think that there is something that predates government. Government is a tool, but it is not the source of anything. It turns out that that actually is happening in the Senate as well. So here's a discussion between Senator Tim Kaine, who was Hillary Clinton's vice presidential candidate for people who have a short memory. This guy could have been one heartbeat away from the presidency, and Ted Cruz, who's one of my senators. And they're having this really simple, fundamental discussion that I think a lot of people haven't ever considered. And if you haven't, I'm going to give you a little bit more on it as well.
The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling.
So Senator Kaine said in this hearing that he found it a radical and dangerous notion that you would say our rights came from God and not from government. I just walked into the hearing as he was saying that, and I almost fell out of my chair. Because that radical and dangerous notion, in his words, is literally the founding principle upon which the United States of America was created. And if you do not believe me, and you made reference to this, Mr. Barnes, then you can believe perhaps the most prominent Virginian to ever serve, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator, not by government, not by the Democratic National Committee, but by God."
Right? Isn't that simple? Now, the Declaration of Independence is not a document within our governmental structure, and yet it did inform the ideas of the reason why we're a country in the first place. And so this is something that people should not be really debating. To call us a theocracy and to say that we're like Iran is absurd. But the people who founded this country shared common belief. They were Christians and deists, and they believed in a creator God, as have almost all of the great thinkers in the last 2,000 years, certainly on the Western side of this world. So we've got a real problem here if we can't discuss that. But then the other question is what are the rights? What is a right? And there was a really good discussion that went on Timcast. This is a sort of a dissection of that Timcast discussion. And it's with a guy named Warren Smith. He does the Secret Scholar Society, pretty good channel on YouTube where he breaks down and does a kind of a discussion from an intellectual level, from a philosophical perspective of what is the argument being made. So this is a Timcast clip about rights. And if you cannot articulate what a right is, the odds are you're not going to be able to defend it, which I think is a bigger problem right now. And then we're going to get into tariffs. We're going to get into constitutional authorities and a couple of other things. But all of these stem from this fundamental question that Americans probably don't even know what are rights and from whence do they come?
Tim doesn't seem to really know what hit him here.
You have no right to do shit except whatever you can enforce. Right. Your mechanism is force, and the mechanism against you is force.
And so
all rights are is force.
You're talking about government protections, not rights.
No, I'm talking about rights. What is a right?
He has not thought this through in this way before, because most people don't go to this level. When you encounter someone who has...
The reality is, rights are recognized as things that we can and must do to survive and maximize potential.
I think rights are force, and I think that...
You think rights are force?
Government
rights are force.
What do you mean rights are force?
Wait a minute, what? But hang on a sec.
Right, to me, is an entitlement absent duty. That's a right. Okay, you're entitled to it, but you have no duty.
What does that mean?
If you have a right to own a gun, do you have a duty to own a gun?
Do you have a duty to speak?
No, you don't have a duty to speak.
If you have a right to vote, do you have a duty to vote?
So it would be an entitlement.
That's your argument.
It's an entitlement, but absent a duty.
The line is drawn on two layers by the laws of physics and the legal framework.
But you can speak.
Yeah, you can.
And so
until you can't,
the question
until somebody stops you with force.
You only have a right if you can defend it against force. Founding fathers made it clear that we've created this framework, but it's up to you to be able to protect it and keep it.
So you're talking about government restrictions are made up by us as a people.
Just people can adhere to your rights without any form of government. If you're walking down the street and you speak, and a guy turns around and smacks you in the mouth and breaks your jaw, right? He has now used force against whatever this right you think you have to speak.
We do walk around today as though this is all it's just the way it is and nothing can challenge it. But
something can challenge it because all of your rights can be infringed upon, as we have seen. And so if you don't have the ability to project force, again, I really like this entitlement absent duty. It is something you are permitted to do, but not something that you must do. And it is certainly something that if you want to maintain your ability to do it, you have to be able to defend it. By the way, it seems really clear to me, looking at the Bill of Rights, that that was something well understood by the folks that founded this country. You have certain inalienable rights that you are entitled to, assuming you can defend it, and they are given to you by your creator. Your creator also gives you the ability to stand and hold those things. They can be taken away by people They can infringe upon your rights, which is the entire purpose of why we have a Bill of Rights, because the government is one of the great infringers. So all of that is to bring up this story. We now have judges who are going to sort of destroy the fabric of what is meant by our constitutional structure. Again, we're supposed to have 3 specific branches of government that are going to have unique duties. You're going to have the legislature, which is supposed to draft and propose the mechanisms by which our government operates. You're going to have the person who executes that policy, those plans, those laws under the executive. And then you're going to have this referee. We didn't have a Supreme Court defined, by the way. The Supreme Court wasn't necessarily truly defined in its current form with judicial review and everything. It was not defined, but it was a sort of referee in your Article 3 powers. So Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. What happens when Article 1 powers are assigned to the Article 2 branch of government? You start having a crossing of the streams, and you start immediately realizing that we've got a real problem here on our hands because people are not operating in the way that the system was designed. And that's when you start sort of cutting out the legs on the scaffolding to the point where right now we are in like sort of an upside down pyramid where everything hinges on nothing. There's very, very little supporting our structure. And a lot of that has been undermined over the last 100 years or so, or undermined by the last 100 years. So here we have something that shows you something pretty bizarre. I'm always very weary when I see rare, novel, unprecedented are really good words to key in on for news stories. In a rare interview or in rare interviews, federal judges are criticizing the Supreme Court's handling of Trump cases. Now, this is inevitable at this point, isn't it? Because if people are going to go out there and they are the hero of their own story, and they're a federal judge in the appellate circuit, or maybe they're in the district, and they have decided, this is my opinion, and I believe my opinion is factually the case, no matter what else happens. I'm the good guy in this story. And then the Supreme Court or their appeals circuit has overturned them. Yeah. You're going to start having people that are a little bit upset. And more people think that that needs to be shared. So we're seeing 10 judges telling NBC News the Supreme Court needs to explain its rulings better, and they're urging Chief Justice John Roberts to defend the judiciary against external criticism. That is not the job of the judiciary. They just say what is and what is not. They are attempting to be an impartial referee, even though we know that they are not. That's the nature of having a political court. It's really not good for our system. Federal judges are frustrated by the Supreme Court for increasingly overturning lower court rulings involving the Trump administration with little or no explanation, with some worry that the practice is undermining the judiciary. Some judges believe that the Supreme Court, and in particular Chief Justice John Roberts, could be doing more to defend the integrity of their work as Donald Trump and his allies are harshly criticizing those who rule against him, and there are violent threats against judges that are on the rise. Suddenly political violence is a problem. In rare interviews with NBC News, a dozen federal judges, they said earlier 10, so a dozen federal judges appointed by both Democrats and Republicans. It's very clear that they show how fair they are, including those appointed by Donald Trump and serving around the country, have pointed out a pattern that has recently emerged. Here's the pattern. Lower court judges hand down contentious case rulings against or involving the Trump administration. They painstakingly research the law to reach their rules. Remember, we're setting up an authority here. They are the authority because they are the first person character in their own stories. And then when they go against Donald Trump or the administration officials, the allies criticize these judges in harsh terms, and the government appeals to the Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, and therefore the Supreme Court affirms what Trump wanted in the first place. And all of that is bad. Well, nobody is looking at what their own culpability is in that. And nobody there seems to point out that they seem to have a pretty ridiculous bias. And the fact that we keep seeing people shopping for the right judge in the right district to bring the right case to try to make national and ridiculous case law. Here's another story about this. This was something coming from ABC News today. A judge is blocking Trump's $2.2 billion Harvard funding freeze. In other words, the Trump administration said there's $2.2 billion in government funding, in grants, in research, and we're not going to give it to you because we don't like some of the things you're doing in other scenarios. And the judge said, well, that's not fair, so we're going to block it. So once again, we have a U.S. district judge. It happens to be a female judge. It's an 84-page order that says that the Trump administration used anti-Semitism as a smokescreen to unlawfully block billions in research funding. We must fight anti-Semitism, but we need to equally protect our rights, including our right to free speech, and neither goal nor needs should be sacrificed on the altar of the other. But what is that? Well, we have a right to free speech, and therefore we have a right to $2.2 billion in research grants to a university that's private? Why is Harvard entitled? Why do they have a right to public funds? And I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know how to make the argument for it. And my guess is they probably don't make it here because she already decided what the case was going to be. And unfortunately, this is why you get overturned. If you come into it with a preconceived notion, you oftentimes will find yourself not arguing something very well or strong. I think I've got another story here too. This is another great story. This is not salacious at all, is it, folks? Donald Trump is trying to blackmail the Supreme Court. This is from Politico. Totally apolitical thing. Legal arguments for Trump's tariffs are weak. The question is whether or not the president has the ability to put in tariffs. I'm going to show you why the president actually has a significant more authority than maybe he would have according to the Constitution. Again, this is a failing of our system. But if you don't know history, and if you don't understand the way that our system works and how it has been subverted by itself, by the way, from human nature to be lazy and otherwise, you're not going to understand this. For those of you that are listening on Spotify right now, we're going to grab a little quick commercial break, so you'll hear a canned ad. There it is. The funny thing about these canned ads that pop in is that some of you tell me that they don't pop in. You actually give me your comments below, and it makes me kind of laugh because then other people say, oh, just rewind one time and you'll freaking hear the ad. So I just don't want you guys to get hit with some loud voice that's not mine when you're not expecting it. That's why we do it there, and I can delineate the actual times. Donald Trump's making a last-ditch effort to salvage his beloved, beleaguered tariff policy. No emotional language in this. And they're heading to the Supreme Court in hopes that the Republican appointees will come to his rescue. Same argument being made by ABC. Same argument saying that the Trump administration is going to basically lean on a 6-3 majority of people that I thought were totally fair. This is why you hear Democrats talking about packing the court. It's totally okay if it's our people, because we're going to decide what the outcome should be, and then we'll go out there and figure out how to make the rules behind it. Look, the rules are, as he was president in 2017, 18, 19, and 20, he put in some justices. He got to get his people. They got confirmed. Other people did not. The rules are the rules. Is it necessarily like the greatest thing in the world? No, we have a totally non-impartial system at this point. That's how we're playing. Desperation is both palpable and warranted, given the conspicuous weakness of the administration's legal claims. They're already making an argument against it, underscored by a series of lower court rulings against him. I would argue that that doesn't mean much. What it means is that we have partisan actors at every level, and the partisan actors that want tariffs are going up against the partisan actors that have to be in the judiciary, who think that they can make law through rulings. That's not the way that our country was designed. It's not the way that our system was designed. And all this is because the Article 1 powers have been thrown away, because it's hard to be a legislator. It's hard to do the real work of being a legislator. If you're doing it properly, it probably should be a full-time job at this point. It's not designed to be that way originally, but they didn't have nearly as many laws, and they didn't have nearly as many people. And what has led to the president and his aides make increasingly histrionic public claims about what will happen if the Supreme Court does not cave and side with Donald Trump. So that's the blackmail. If the courts do not sign off on the administration tariff policy, it would be a total disaster for the country, literally destroy the United States of America, Trump said on Friday. He doubled down on those claims on Tuesday, the day before yesterday. Transparently ridiculous assertion that the United States is taking in $17 trillion because of tariffs. The interesting thing about that quote is they have an ellipses in between taking in 17 trillion and because of tariffs. They've left out the actual argument that Donald Trump made, and I don't have it in front of me, and I'm not going to go hyperlink this. All I know is you're not presenting a coherent argument when you have to cut out the middle of somebody's thing. That's called context. I have a little situation with law right now. What's even more amazing for me is when you see people in the press who have a right to speak, right? A right. They're able to go out and say whatever they like in the way that they like. It just turns out when you go to the judiciary, it's supposed to actually be a little bit more fair. If you come at me with a lawsuit and you exclude the part where I define what the word honeypot means, which by the way, I did. I've been going back through some of the old footage because I was like, what in the world am I dealing with here? If you guys don't know, Kash Patel's girlfriend has filed a $5 million defamation lawsuit against me. And the defamation lawsuit in some ways hinges on the definition of the word honeypot, which I explained while I was talking to Steve Friend as a colloquial term in intelligence for a pretty woman who men might want to talk to. It's actually pretty well thought of. There's a lot of different potential definitions of it. A honeypot could be obviously everything from sexual entrapment and relationships and manipulation all the way up to just a pretty lady at a bar who might elicit information because she's pretty and you might want to talk to her because you're a man, and that's just how things work. Vice versa, that could also work for dudes. If you guys haven't seen the movie The Interview, then you're missing out on the classic description. What do they call it? Honey dicking, which my friends and I have actually used unironically, but also humorously in a CI skiff. So words matter, and skipping context matters. And of course, Politico has no problem with doing that because these people are trying to get an outcome. Let's go to the simple fact that in theory, tariff powers, the ability to levy taxes and duties and imposts, including tariffs on imports, resides with the legislature. It's an Article 1, Section 8 power. That's the congressional authority. That's the constitutional authority by which tariffs are levied. So there's going to be an argument about this. And then you have history and time and context. And Congress has delegated particular powers of tariffs to the president over various things. And so if you go look, and this is just a simple AI answer, we can get deeper into it with people who care deeply. But the fact of the matter is that there was a Trade Act of 1962, and that allows the president to impose tariffs on things that might pose a national security threat. So now you have a national security implication, oftentimes falls under the president for the speed of which it needs to be acted on. The Trade Act of 74, where the U.S. trade representatives can recommend tariffs on foreign countries that engage in unjustifiable, unreasonable, or discriminatory trade practices, which is the argument that Donald Trump has made, that other countries are in fact discriminating against us or doing unjustifiable things or working unreasonably. And it is unfairly inconveniencing the American businesses that have to compete. And then you have the International Economic Powers Act, where the president can declare a national emergency, which he's said several times, things like that, and regulate certain imports through tariffs when there's a situation that threatens our nation. And so whether that be fentanyl, the clarity of that, that's what they're going to adjudicate. That's not necessarily a weak action. What that tells me, though, is that in multiple steps for multiple years over the decades, Congress continues to send its authorities away from itself. And we have the people running our Congress, I guess, that we deserve as a nation, but they're not necessarily serious people. Does America deserve serious legislators? No. We have a Democrat Party that fields men dressed up like women. Here's Timothy/Sarah McBride talking about how he's living in men's heads rent-free, and we deserve better politicians. I think we probably have the least serious group of people running our country right now that we've ever had. And to be fair, we're probably the least serious nation that we've ever been. So it probably lines up. Here's a thing that I can't get out of my head when I listen to it.
We will not take a lecture on decorum from a party that incited an insurrection. I appear to live rent-free in the minds of some of my Republican colleagues. I wish that they would spend even a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, thinking about how to lower the costs for American families. I wish they would spend a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, figuring out how to make government actually work better, rather than making it work worse in order to prove that government can't work. They are obsessed with culture war issues. The Republican Party is obsessed with culture war issues. It is weird and it is bizarre. And the American people deserve serious legislators, serious elected officials who are focused on bringing people together to deliver real results for the American people.
I mean, do we? We should, but do we actually deserve that? You have a man lecturing Americans with women behind signing off while he's dressed like them. That is the plain facts of what we just saw on the screen. And saying that Republicans are not interested in lowering costs. I'm not confident that the government has anything to do with lowering costs, although they do now. They shouldn't. But they do because they got involved in the Federal Reserve System and they've been taxing us endlessly and they've been punching money out into the economy in order to try to sustain something that's unsustainable. They've inflated the cost of things by deflating or reducing the value of our dollar. And this has been going on for 100 plus years. I mean, really? Does anyone remember when the last massive spike of inflation happened? It didn't happen when Donald Trump was in office per se, did it? The inflation hit a accelerated pace, let's say it very gently, under Joe Biden's administration. We watched housing costs like double. And some of it was because of the upward pressure. So don't tell me that these people are you can't say that we're the only people talking about the solution when you are the reason that the problem is there. And you also can't tell me that there are two separate realities we're living in, when it's pretty clear that there are two separate realities we're living in. One of us believes that men are men and women are women, and one of us believes that there's some sort of non-immutable characteristic, and you can somehow dance between quote-unquote genders when biological sex is not involved, which is wild. And if you want to know why the CDC, which is the title of today's episode, the CDC employees are asking why they don't have credibility. They're demanding credibility. It is their right to be credible medical practitioners and to give you facts that you must operate on. No, you have no ability to use force to get that. You have a right to respect in so much as you have the ability to command and demand respect. And they have none. So this story is very funny to me. This is a little story that came from NBC News. And even the headline can be extrapolated much more broadly. So if you're looking, you're seeing a picture of a woman holding a sign that says, "Protect and enable the CDC workforce." And the headline is, "The United States is heading towards two very different vaccination realities." It's not vaccination, folks, as many of you realize. We're not talking about realities of vaccination. We're talking about people living with two different constructs of reality. One of them is closer to approximating what is actually reality. And the other one is a fantasy where everyone is affirmed with their own version of reality, and it's totally unsustainable. You cannot believe that there is no such thing as an underlying truth. This was the funny argument. If you guys listen to the longer clip of Tim Pool trying to articulate his position, eventually he ends up at the same place where who was the guy that was with him? His name's Andrew Wilson. Andrew Wilson was essentially arguing that the rights come from God, and the only way that you could defend them is using the tools that God gave you to be able to defend your rights. Again, it's an entitlement absent a duty. You're certainly entitled to respect, but we don't have to respect you, and you don't have to go out there and earn that respect. You can't enforce it. So is it really a right, is I guess the question. Are you really entitled to respect as all people? I'm going to read this story real quick because it's kind of fun. And then we're going to play some clips that kind of point out this thing, including things like the most fundamental right, like the freedom to speak, which, we could use to criticize the CDC. And we're going to. It's something we can use to ask questions of folks who have been put in position of authority, and we don't respect them. We don't believe that they're honest actors. And you can't just demand it unless you can actually enforce that. And you can't. You can't enforce it on us. You cannot individually come out here and make each one of us think something. And I would say after 2020, most people are even more hardened in these positions. Hence the quote unquote two different versions of vaccine realities. It's actually just the way that we look at things. And it's the reason why we're having a discussion about culture wars. Because one group went off the rails when it comes to what is reality. So forget about culture wars. We're now actually arguing for fundamental principles of perception that human beings can have. The turmoil at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention states, turmoil at the Center for Disease Prevention and Control, and states beginning to take more control over their vaccine decisions, threaten to fracture the once national consensus around immunization. I don't know why that's bad, but they actually act like it is. Setting the stage for a reorganization of the way that vaccine recommendations work across the United States. We're talking about decentralizing information and authority. That actually is a fundamentally American principle. That's the way that our country was designed. 50 independent laboratories for freedom. The move together points towards an increasingly stark divide emerging in the United States around vaccination. These are the longest, crappiest written run-on sentences. America needs editors, and they're too lazy to get them. Some of Republican-led states are starting to roll back or eliminate mandates, while Democrat-led states split from the CDC to come up with their own vaccination guidance. On Wednesday, California and Oregon and Washington announced that they are forming a public health alliance to provide credible information about vaccine safety in response to the firing of CDC Director Susan Moranes. Now, here's the fun thing about firing a CDC director and seeing that California, Oregon, and Washington are the ones that are leading the charge to now make sure that everybody gets a vaccine. When I was a child, and probably when many of you remember this, the only people who were not getting vaccines were the hippy-dippy lefties, and they were in, let me just think about it, Oregon, Washington, and California, probably Northern California to be specific. It was a unique part of the country that had all kinds of ideas ahead of their time, I think, and maybe not for the right reasons, but maybe they actually did have the right reasons. Those were the people, and they were leftists, hard leftists at the time, uber libs, hippie types, moms who, didn't believe in giving their kids haircuts and thought they should be barefoot everywhere. And maybe there's some arguments for some of these things, but they also didn't want to inject vaccines. Isn't that interesting that suddenly you can get all those people to flip And they do it, why? Because Donald Trump is a very, very bad man. I'll show you what that flip looks like. It looks like this. This looks like a person that has immediately divorced themselves from reality, is not tethered by any of the bounds, and so whatever their position is, it can be easily shifted. We have gone from Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. Okay, hold on. This is really critical. Donald Trump is literally Hitler, and he is going to destroy this country. And he is the most dangerous human being ever. To Donald Trump is already in office. We need to pivot to the next threat. Donald Trump is actually a clown, and he's not really scary. And I'm not actually worried about Donald Trump. Who am I speaking about? These are the words of Joy Reid, who made millions of dollars a year going on TV and talking about the actual fascistic tactics of this president who's in right now. But now he's not a threat. But you know who is a threat? The next person who could be elected, the heir apparent, J.D. Vance. This divorce, this is the unburdened by what has been mentality that we laugh at. And I've got some Kamala for you guys as well. To say these things unironically and know that it doesn't, like, none of this stuff matters. You're going to just say whatever works right now in the moment, and you're not going to be held accountable for your previous thing. That actually is freedom of the press. I guess this is the free press. Listen to these women discussing our current president, who's no longer a threat to them, because we're going to look at the next one. Because that's what progressives do. They look down the line and they look for quote unquote progress.
This guy scares me more than Trump, to be honest, because I think Trump as being a self-absorbed goof.
Yeah, a useful idiot, I think.
Idiot whose narcissism and sort of almost self-loathing because he was never a legitimate billionaire. All he wants is to be a king and to be a billionaire. Being president gave him the kingdom and gave him billionaire status off of these Bitcoin schemes. He's living his best life now, and then he wants revenge against everyone who was ever mean to him. He's Charlie from the Star Trek episode. And that's all he is. He's a simple man with not a lot of complex views. Vance has complex views, and they are frightening. And this guy would implement Project 2025 on purpose, not Trump doing it by accident.
Okay, we're back to Project 2025, right? We can't have it. We can't have the opposing political team get the ball and then do the things that they promised that they would do with it because of democracy somehow, even though people voted for it. That's what they're scared of. They're completely divorced from the reality of their previous statements. And we know that. And here's something kind of fun, because do you not want to hear that Democrats should have the freedom of speech in this country? I do. That's what I signed up for. When I swore the oath as an enlisted guy, when I swore the oath when I was in federal government, I actually believe that Bill of Rights exists. And while every individual person does not have the ability to stop that punch to the face that makes your speaking cease, I do think that the government has a responsibility to protect it. So I'm consistent. And I think many honest conservatives are also. We're willing to hear your position. That's why you don't see a lot of political violence from the right, not from actual conservatives. You might see it from people that they call right, but they end up being something else. Actual conservatives will say, oh, what is your argument? I'm going to ask you more questions. I don't immediately assume that you are evil, even though I think what Joy Reid said there is utterly ridiculous. I don't think she's evil. I'm going to embrace the idea that she thinks that she's the good guy, because that's the only way that I can operate in the world. So I've got questions for you. And if I can dismantle your argument with questions and curiosity, empathy or sympathy, then that's what I'm going to do. Tell me more about the things you said. Well, how does that square with the thing you said previously? Have you moved on from your previous positions? Do you no longer hold them? Because I do remember very distinctly the existential threat that Donald Trump faced. Is he no longer an existential threat? It's the same question I have about COVID, by the way. It's the same reason why we don't trust the CDC. We don't trust the CDC because of one simple thing. You said one thing, it was not true, and then you didn't own it. And now you're trying to run away and act like what you say is also true. There's real simple questions. It's the same debate for the COVID crisis. You guys ready for this? Here's what you do with your family members. Here's what you do with people that really, really desperately believe the government is telling them the truth. The government told you that you needed to get a shot. You had to, or you would die. You would face, this is the president of the United States who said it, you would face a winter of serious illness and death for your families. And you were also implied to be a bad and morally inconsistent person. When did you stop getting, do you still get COVID booster shots? If not, when did you stop? And what changed when that happened? It's quite simple. I'm willing to give you the credibility as a human being to change your mind. But I want you to be able to explain it to me because I've got simple questions. Why should you be considered trustworthy or an authority on anything, including your own opinions, if you don't know the answer? When did you stop getting COVID shots, and what changed that made you stop doing it? And now, can you respect that I saw that thing far earlier? Does it make me a bad person? No. Remember, at the time when this was all going on, the call for censorship was coming directly from one side of the aisle. And here is that side. This is Kamala Harris arguing that saying things I don't agree with is dangerous in complete ignoring of our American principles that you might have rights and you might have the right to speak and you might have the right to a free press and to be able to go out and publish things if you have the ability. She was calling for the censorship of Donald Trump on X, on Twitter at the time. And look at Senator Elizabeth Warren, who we don't necessarily agree with very often. She looks aghast. This is a gotcha moment. This is not a gotcha. This is an un-American principle, which is, I'm glad why she's not president.
Senator Warren, I just want to say that I was surprised to hear that you did not agree with me that on this subject of what should be the rules around corporate responsibility for these big tech companies, when I called on Twitter to suspend Donald Trump's account, that you did not agree. And I would urge you to join me, because here we have Donald Trump, who has 65 million Twitter followers, and is using that platform as the president of the United States to openly intimidate witnesses, to threaten witnesses, to obstruct justice. And he and his account should be taken down. We saw in El Paso that shooter in his manifesto was informed by how Donald Trump uses that platform. And this is a matter of corporate responsibility. Twitter should be held accountable and shut down that site. It is a matter of safety and corporate accountability. Thank you.
Oh, good. And where is that in the Constitution, that there's corporate accountability and safety? I don't know. How about the CDC has inconsistent lab practices that, quote unquote, threaten its credibility? Could it be that we don't respect the CDC because of things the CDC did? And by the way, the CDC is a representative and gets money from our government. If your government doesn't do the job it's supposed to do, shouldn't you be asking questions about it? You don't get to demand credibility, reputation, respect without earning it. And it turns out once you lose it, and they lost it in a really big way, for years now, 5 years of really inconsistent, ridiculous, partisan, preconceived understandings before actually having science behind it. We've looked at you and decided you're an ascientific group. And the only way to get it back right now is to actually earn it. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a generation for the FBI to do the same thing. Probably 10 plus years for them to get that same credibility back. You don't get to just change the branding. The CDC wants it right now. So what do? They go on a messaging op, and they put out a woman who is a doctor. She's a physician. She has a degree in public health. She's got lots of credentials. She's also this really weird faith representative. Her church is this sort of like smoothie of Judaism and Christianity. They say shalom and agape on their website, which I think is funny because now we're talking about agape, which is sort of the Greek idea of unconditional love, which is described as the way that Christ was killed for unconditional love for humanity, and then shalom, which is what, like a wishing of peace in Hebrew. Which I don't get it. This woman is a mess. And when you go look at what she's all about, she's about health justice and a bunch of other Marxist types ideas that are bastardized versions of good ideas, like these things where the government's going to come in and enforce it. So that's their defender. And then you've got Abby Phillips, who's on CNN. I think CNN only exists for clips like this right now so that we can lampoon them. They have an unlimited ability to get ignorant and ridiculous people to sit and say something that sounds like English and means nothing. And they also get like one or two, quote unquote, conservative types who are not even like hard right people. And they easily debunk this stuff. So this is Ben Ferguson, who runs the Ben Ferguson Show, talking to this woman who is an NAACP attorney or NAACP health equity director. She'll be on the screen in a second. Her name is Chris Parnell. Of course it is. It's Chris Parnell. She has a man's name because she works in this sort of projection of force area. You guys tell me what you think.
They're not outlawed. That's good. The parents are going to decide. 2, there's a cause and effect, and the CDC lied to us about COVID, and they lied a lot. They lied about masks in schools.
Not true.
They lied about distancing. They lied about the efficiency or the effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccine.
Not true.
It is true. They said that distancing. Hold on, wait. Did they not lie about the effectiveness of a mask when internal documents said
talk about
that the mask did not work?
I just want you to take a moment when you're listening to this. Imagine that you're getting this argument, because leftists can't do it. People on the left can't do it. Oftentimes women are not great at doing this, where they can't just sit and listen. The ones that are really good at arguing and beat you in arguments, they listen. Women, if you're really good at this, you know what I'm talking about. The men that are really good at this will listen. They're like, not true, not true. I already know what you're going to say now. So my argument is going to be crafted by the fact that I'm now talking to an openly hostile person that doesn't believe anything I'm saying. So I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm talking at you. Imagine if you sat and listened and said the CDC lied, blah, 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 blah. So Ben Ferguson's making his point. And at the end of it, you'd say, what things did they say that were lies? And how do you know that they're lies? This is how you would debunk something like this. This is how a clever listener might be able to enter into this fray. They can't do it. They're immediately triggered because you're saying things that they believe, that they feel are untrue. So the reaction we're going to get here is 100% emotional. And I don't think it lands. It just makes them look ridiculous. And then you get a moderator, quote unquote, moderator of the discussion, who's not an expert, who knows very little, but already comes from a preconceived point of view. And she's going to do the same thing. So you're going to get two women ganging up on one guy. By the way, they're both black women. There's one white guy there, and he just like fends him off like he's sitting here at the top of the ramparts and you're just trying to climb up and all you have is a flimsy ladder. It's weak because we know they lied, because we all lived through the lie, people. That's the crazy part. People who want credibility accept that something happened and it was not done well, and then we move on. This is the same problem that the Trump administration has with the Epstein files. You have to admit this was poorly laid out. We didn't give good information, and now we're going to take as much time as it takes for you to be believing that we're giving you the complete access. Instead, they're kind of dripping it out a little bit at a time. They're not acknowledging their own role in this. Here's this lady going on. She's going to get into a back and forth discussion about, sort of nitpicking. And she's wrong. She's objectively wrong. Like the CDC said things that were false.
Schools. If we're looking at high quality masks, right? So P95 masks,
I would love it if they
those masks actually prevent infections. Because look, this is the way science works. Science works that as you get data, the type of communication that you give improves. But you can't say the CDC lied. You can't say the CDC lied.
I actually think it's important.
It's very important.
If you're saying things that are not accurate, I do think it's fair for her to counter that.
The CDC said that masking was effective and worked when they knew internal documents said.
It
and
does
the emails
work.
came out that it didn't work.
Okay, well, what
true
she
or false?
does. Okay,
6 foot distancing.
Hold on a
true or
second.
false? The CDC say
hold on a second.
Misinformation, folks.
And it
You're
didn't.
seeing it in action.
First of all,
they said
as disinformation, folks. You're seeing it in action. What are you talking about? They said all those things. We lived through this stuff. Some of us lost jobs over this nonsense. It was completely arbitrary. It was nonsensical. Some of us have worked in biological protocols where there are things like CBRNE, chemical and nuclear and radiation and biological warfare. You don't put on a freaking bandana, which is what was acceptable for a lot of reasons. You don't put on one stupid paper mask or two stupid paper masks, as we saw Anthony Fauci go and do in front of Congress. 2 masks, like a complete madman. And then he took them off when the cameras were gone. We all lived through this. We know that this is false. So you don't get to demand credibility. And it's just the same thing as like, there's this discussion right now as well about Ashley Babbitt. They were having the same discussion, the same show. I'm just going to show you how dumb this stuff is. This is why I don't think they have an audience that people can listen. First of all, who wants to hear 5 people arguing over the top of each other? Maybe there's an audience for that, but I think it's all women, and I think it's all like wildly crazy women. Sensible women don't want to hear a bunch of other people arguing. I've seen one of the most funny things I saw when I was in Spain with my parents. My mom is driving a car and she drives up to this checkpoint, and she doesn't have any, like, she doesn't know how the checkpoint works. And there's like a toll booth or something. And there's this guy and he's wearing like a Spanish, uniform of some kind. He's a government employee. And she drives up and she starts rattling off in the fastest, most desperate English you've ever heard at a high pitch. And the guy looks at her, laughs because he has no idea what she's saying. He speaks like Catalan, and he starts singing and he walks away. That is the answer to that. If you listen to CNN arguing where 4 people are speaking all at once, you're going to walk away. You're just going to laugh. You're like, I don't want that crap. Imagine making the argument that Ashley Biden was somehow properly investigated for a crime. Do you know what we don't do in the United States? We don't investigate people who are dead. I don't hear anyone in this discussion. This is the same CNN panel. I don't see anyone mentioning the fact that Ashley Biden cannot be and could not be charged with a crime because she was killed in the act of whatever it is that they would have been able to try to accuse her of. And so her actions have been unadjudicated because you're not going to investigate people who are dead, period. So they're arguing about whether or not she should be given a military funeral. This is a crazy position to hold. And the arguments they're having is about whether or not she was pardoned because of the Trump pardon went out over January 6th. There's no conviction in place because she wasn't tried. And for some reason, they've lost the fundamental reality of we don't try dead people in this country, and we don't investigate dead people, generally speaking. We might figure out like what they were about. Did they know somebody? But you can't actually charge dead people with a crime. Not in America. Did I say Ashley Biden? Chat's correcting me. Ashley Babbitt. I knew what I was talking about. So did you. Here we go. Here's them discussing this thing.
I don't know, Dante. I mean, what do you think? Maybe this is a natural progression, but it certainly seems like a choice on the part of the administration.
Well, I think you just go speak on the law. It's called abatement ab initio. It's Latin for from the beginning. So she was in the middle of her appeal when she received the pardon. That means her case essentially started over and she's no longer guilty. So if she's no longer guilty, she has the pardon, then she served in the Air Force. She was deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq. She's entitled to the benefits she would be entitled to. I can't sit here as a lawyer and say that her conviction was wiped away, but she should still be penalized as if it wasn't.
And just to clarify, I mean, she was killed in an
I agree with you 100%.
Right? Like, and
climbing into a broken window at the Capitol to overthrow the government.
But I can't insert my opinion over the law.
Can I ask a legal military question? Because her case is essentially wiped away, can the Air Force just decide not to do it as a policy matter, or is she entitled to it no matter what now?
Well, they would have to show why she wouldn't be entitled to it. Naturally, she is entitled to it. Now there is no conviction there.
So there'd be no reason to deny it.
There'll be no reason to deny it.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear why she should be denied it.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear because like there was no adjudication. Like what case are they talking about? Like an argument, some administrative thing? There's no conviction for someone who's not alive. You can't stand trial if you're dead. You can't plea out if you're dead. They didn't have a chance to charge her because she died on the day when the thing happened. That's the end. There's no case. I don't even know what the hell they're talking about when I see this kind of stuff. How is that even a panel discussion by like an attorney who doesn't know the basic facts of what happened on the day? We all saw it. Lieutenant Michael Byrd of the Capitol Police took a shot at a woman who briefly put her head through a window that she could not fit through, and she died as a result of that several seconds later. Our friend Steve Baker saw it. Forget two different vaccine realities in America. We're talking about two different actual realities. And it's not helping that there's a press push to try to make it look like that this is a GOP issue or otherwise, like the CDC somehow, like the GOP has some requirement to create credibility for a government agency. The answer for GOP, if you're actually trying to do like what the Republican Party stands for, should be reducing the significant amounts of government we have. GOP is uneasy with RFJ Jr. He's got a big high-profile hearing. So you've got CDC employees crying en masse. There was an entire article about something like 1,000+ employees have signed on to this op-ed saying, we don't like the way that our Health and Human Services Secretary is not defending our credibility. Your credibility is shit to Americans on purpose because of their actions, which were highlighted and then argued with by this like public health lady. Here's John Kennedy from Louisiana, Republican, someone that we often like because the things he says are funny. He's folksy and amusing. And he's talking about whether or not RFK Jr. has done enough to fix the CDC's reputation. Again, they have every right to do things to restore their reputation, but they have no ability to force anyone to stand behind it. There's no duty on our end to respect them simply because they want it. It's a really, really strange moment. And this is the opposite. This is why I think this is all political theater, because there's nothing about this that makes me think that I want to even be respectful of them at all ongoing.
We need to restore that confidence. And so far, I don't see where Secretary Kennedy has done that. All I see over there is, at the moment, is a multiple vehicle pileup. I'm not saying that Secretary Kennedy is wrong or right. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not qualified to say. I'm just saying that, when I met with Bobby in my office, I told him, I said, your job number one is to restore the confidence of the American people and the institution of public health in America. And so far, he hasn't done that.
I don't understand how you could give that man that job. That's an unwinnable job. That's not doable. He doesn't have the ability to do it. The workers at that place have the ability to do it in the same way that our institutions of justice. The CDC faces the same uphill battle that the FBI does underneath their departments, respectively. The departments of HHS and the Department of DOJ, of Justice, both of those also face an uphill battle of credibility. The entire branch of the judiciary faces an uphill battle because we look at them as being oftentimes not credible because of the way that they act. That's not because of the people that just came in and charge them. And there's nothing conservative about saying that we need to force people to respect our institutions, which is what John Kennedy was saying. His job is to rebuild the trust in the institutions. No, this is a golden opportunity to dismantle all of these institutions. They've outlived their usefulness in many ways. Americans don't want it. Decentralize it. You've got the great reason why. Nobody trusts you. Your brand is garbage. We're going to reorganize and we're going to send the funding out to the states. That would be the right answer if you were a conservative. This is why I don't think any of these people are serious about anything. And it's also problematic because if you go back to the plain language and the way that this thing, a United States of America does not need some CDC issuing whether or not there should be eviction moratoriums done in California, New York, or anywhere else, and that nobody is allowed to evict people because of a public health crisis that they are basically handling very poorly with bad information that turns on politics. This is the ultimate opportunity to dismantle things, and they didn't do it. So, a lot of irrational things go into if you come from a predetermined outcome, you are not ever going to be able to make the right argument. And again, the predetermined outcome is that government must continue, which is what people in government do. And the other day I said it, and I don't know if somebody was being sarcastic or otherwise, but one of the comments I got was, I had no idea that governments were so incentivized to grow their budgets. I assume that was a sarcastic comment from one of you out there. That being said, if you guys are listening, make sure you're liking the video. Make sure you are subscribing to the channels you are. I'd love it if you guys were over there on YouTube. You're seeing our YouTube audience continues to grow every single day. Really grateful for that. If you're watching over on Rumble, I'm going to have to just do less and less interest in Rumble because it sucks as a platform. It's really, really bad. Like, I can't tell you how much extra work it takes just to be involved in that. And I don't know if it seems intentional. I've been told it is. The long and short of it is, if you don't realize that the purpose of government is to grow government, that's why we did an entire article or episode on the self-licking ice cream cone. You're really missing out on the fundamental purpose. Nobody ever gets promoted for shrinking the size of their government. Nobody ever gets elevated for making a smaller version of the government agency that they're involved in. And that's a real problem if you're a conservative person. It's certainly the problem for me. I'm going to give you another sort of illogical argument. I just did our little self-promotion, so thanks for listening, all of you. That's kind of the argument I have for the day. I want to play something that's funny. I've been kind of neglecting the palate cleansers. This is a classic argument. We'll call it a masculine and feminine argument. One of them is a predetermined outcome. You see if you guys can decide which one of these makes the most amount of sense. And I do think this is kind of the quote-unquote two realities we're living in right now. And we can also still laugh about it, because if you're married, you've probably had something like this. Well, some of you had. I've never had this argument.
Hey, what are you doing?
Eating a sandwich.
Oh, we're going to my parents' house for dinner.
I know, I can't wait to see them.
Okay, then why are you eating?
I'm hungry.
You can't wait an hour?
I'll be hungry again. It won't be an hour. I'm going to have to hug them, talk. It'll be like 2 hours before I even see an appetizer.
Okay, what if I tell them as soon as we walk in, he's hungry?
No, that's weird. It's all about me eating.
That's what you want.
No, it's not. I want to eat right now.
I would never do this to your parents.
Oh.
I'm eating a sandwich.
Why are people like that? He wants to go over and see the parents, but he also wants to eat right now. Those things are mutually exclusive. They don't have anything to do with one another. And he said he'll eat later. And he also knows the score. Again, you can't make us think one thing and then turn the argument into something completely different. This different sort of reality. And the reality that she has, she's seeing that she's wronged. I think it's kind of funny. All right, one last little thing about food, just because I think it's really funny as well. For some of you guys that are dealing with diet and you're dealing with exercise and you're trying to do routines, just remember, even super fit people, even super motivated people, right? You may have a right to get in shape. You may have a right to go and exercise your ability to have a better diet, but you may not have the you don't have the duty to do it necessarily, and many of you don't even have the will or the force to be able to empower it. So here's a little 13-second clip about trying to cut cookies out of your diet. I just thought this was funny. I saw it the other day.
Day 1 of not eating cookies. Day 2 of not eating cookies. Day 1 of not eating cookies. Day 1 of not eating cookies. Same day, about 20 minutes later, not eating cookies.
All of us have gotten those false starts. We've all been in that category where we were starting a good attitude or a good sort of routine and then failed consistently over and over again. Probably many of you have done that. I'm going to start working out this week. I'll start working out next week. I'll start working out next week. All that thing. Yeah. Stick to it. Keep trying. That's the message. That's the message here at the Seraphin House, because we continue to do our best to give you guys the best stuff we can do. And I hope you guys appreciate it. Support our sponsors. Support the programs where they can. Find us over on YouTube if you want. Follow us on X. Very much appreciated at Kyle Seraphin. And go to locals. It's kyleseraphin.com. If you guys have not heard, we do a call-in show on Thursday nights. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's at 7 p.m. my time. We take phone calls for about 90 minutes where it's whatever you guys want to talk about, and we just mix it up, and I get to know who's listening out there. So for all of you that want to be part of that, you got to be a subscriber at one of those places mentioned. God bless all of you. Look forward to seeing you again, like I said, this evening, and we'll talk then.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.